its heyday, other studios tried their hands at making horror pictures, usually spurred on by the success Universal was having with them, but invariably they would soon get it out of their systems and then go back to doing the styles and genres that came to them naturally. For Universal, however, thrills and chills were the specialities of the day, and to that end the studio lined up a roster of monsters that have become legendary. Dracula, the Frankenstein monster, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, in addition to a few whose profiles have faded with time, such as Paula the Ape Woman, I've never heard of that one, the Creeper and the Spider Woman. Universal had its own stable of stars as well, masters of the medium, themselves in such a convincing fashion that his scene of being cured by jarring them loose stunned Tucker and later audiences, though Chaney would eventually confess to the pain it caused. Tucker didn't speak as he watched the performance, and the sweat rolled off me, Chaney told journalist Ruth Waterbury. Finally, I heard a single whisper word from him. God, Tucker said, I wanted to say that too, but not for the same reason. But the die was set, and Chaney would go on to even more startling and painful roles. Dracula. Bela Lugosi. This is Bela Lugosi in the role that made him a star and launched Universal horror in the sound era. Prior to 1931, vampire had an entirely different meaning for moviegoers. A vamp, at least in terms of Hollywood, was a sultry, seductive woman who was able to twist a man around her little finger, drawing willpower out of him as though it were a tangible fluid. Movie vamps were exotic silent movie sirens such as Theda Bara or Olga Baklanova. With the release of Dracula, however, a vampire in a Hollywood movie would henceforth most likely be a man, and the draining of life force would not be metaphoric. He really drank blood and retreated to an earth-filled coffin every dawn. Universal's Dracula was not the first screen adaptation of Bram Stoker's 1897 novel. An unlicensed German adaptation called Nosferatu was produced in 1922, but it became the most indelible. So, Dracula 1931. The film of Dracula opens with a scene involving what would become a familiar image within Universal horror: a gathering of Middle European villagers from an undetermined time period. An English real estate agent named Renfield, Dwight Fry, stops in the Transylvanian village en route to Castle Dracula. Despite the frightened warnings of the villagers, he makes his way to the castle, where he meets Count Dracula, Bela Lugosi, of course, who seems polite enough if a bit strange. Dracula communes with wolves and walks through cobwebs without breaking them. Renfield, who is there to finalise the paperwork for Dracula's purchase of an abandoned abbey in the English coastal town of Whitby, tries not to notice. For his troubles, Renfield is bitten by Dracula and becomes his slave, acquiring an insatiable appetite for flies and spiders. With Renfield in tow, Dracula travels to his new home in England on board the ship Vesta, which by the time it docks in Whitby Harbour is a ghost ship. The only living figure on board is the hopelessly insane Renfield, who is quickly committed to the nearby asylum run by Dr. Jack Seward, Herbert Bunton. Dracula, when not killing the crew, has spent the voyage inside a box in the cargo hold. Meanwhile, ingratiates himself with Seward. His daughter Mina asylum and races to Dracula's side, followed by Dr. Van Helsing and John. Enraged that Renfield has led them to the castle, Dracula kills the lunatic and then tries to flee. He gets as far as the crypt, where his coffin is hidden. Van Helsing stakes the vampire, and upon his death, Mina is released from her spell. And that is where the film ends in today's print, but the original version of Dracula featured an epilogue in which Edward Van Sloan addressed the audience directly, wishing them pleasant dreams and then bidding, just pull yourself together and remember that, after all, there are such things. While a similar goodnight ploy had been used for the stage adaptation of Dracula, its purpose in the film was to inform the audience that there would be no trick ending, no jokey revelation that everything they had just watched was an elaborate hoax, which to date had been the norm. Dracula was the first American film to unapologetically present the supernatural at face value, a significance that is often overlooked. So, let's see up here. We have, so that's Renfield being warned by Transylvanian innkeeper not to go to Castle Dracula. And here, this is the castle catacombs and the brides or wives of Dracula. And here, this is a scene showing Dracula at his most elegant, complete with top hat, cane and a monocle around his neck. We're shared by both the English and Spanish versions of Dracula. And here we have Bela Lugosi trying to exert his powers over Professor Van Helsing. Lugosi's hands were virtually characters unto themselves. And this is a promotion poster. And here is Carlos Vilarius in the Spanish language version of Dracula. So the Spanish version came out in 1931. And then there was a follow-up film, Dracula's Daughter, 1936. Picks up exactly where the original left off, with Professor Van Helsing down in the crypt, just having staked Dracula, while Renfield's body lies in a heap nearby, though the hawkers are nowhere to be seen. So these are stills from Dracula's Daughter, played by Gloria Holden, Countess Zaleska. Yeah, and her creepy manservant Sandor. was instead expected to play a grunting, growling ogre. In the book, the monster sounds more like a captain of his college debate team. He groused his way through the screen test, for which he was slathered with clay-coloured grease paint and given a huge wig, complaining that he was reduced to playing a scarecrow. When shown the test, Carl Lammy Jr. rejected it outright. In fact, he reportedly burst out laughing while watching it. While subsequent generations of monster fans have hoped that this legendary footage would someday turn up in a vault, it was most likely destroyed by the studio. For his part, Lugosi had no regrets about letting the role slip away, at least not at first. Robert Flory, however, was crushed when Frankenstein was officially assigned to direct James Whale, whose success with Universal's Waterloo Bridge had rocketed him to the studio's A-list. For the rest of his life, Flory would claim the project had been stolen away from him. There are several different versions of how Karloff, who had been struggling in Hollywood for about 15 years, caught Whale's eye. It was not because of his size. Karloff was reasonably tall, 5'11", but lean to the point of boniness. Then again, so was Carradine. Oh, so he must have been. He was probably going to play as well. The most convincing story that has been put forth is that Whale's domestic partner, David Lewis, recommended him, having seen him a year earlier in the Los Angeles production of a stage play called The Criminal Code, in which the actor made quite a splash in the role of a murderous convict. Once hired, Karloff immediately began putting in late nights in Jack Pierce's makeup room as various makeups were tested. For the approved version of the monster, Karloff's brows and forehead were built up with cotton and a thick sealing liquid called collodion, which Pierce also used to make the scars. A layer of cheesecloth was put over the cotton to simulate pores in the skin. A green-grey grease paint covered everything, which cast the pallor of death on film, while purple was used for shadows. A stringy wig was draped on top of Karloff's enlarged head. The actor's contributions to the makeup consisted of requesting a layer of wax on the eyelids, which made his eyes look dead, and removing a dental bridge, which made his face more sunken. This indentation was further exaggerated with shadow, a detail that metamorphosed into the monster's strange beauty mark on subsequent actors in the role. 13-pound boots with